Chapter 566. Daoist Guangming, and the other two were the first to discover the blissful demon palace. It was also them who had gone through many battles to resolve the crisis. In the end, those who came later didn't encounter any danger, but now they were here to share their gains. Whether it was Yu Qifeng, Daoist Guangming, or even the other martial artists, they were naturally unhappy. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel, Huangfu Weiming said in a deep voice, "Both of you, we discovered the blissful demon palace first. Now that someone is here to rob us, we should join forces to resist the enemy. After that, we'll split the things in the blissful demon palace equally. How about it?" Yu Qifeng and Daoist Guangming looked at each other and nodded. Huangfu Weiming turned his gaze to Chu Xiu and said, "Young friend Lin, it was just a misunderstanding before. Now that someone is here to rob us, you shouldn't be willing to just give up the things to others, right? How about you join us?" They had seen Chu Xiu's strength, and it was indeed amazing. Even if he didn't use the 7 sabers behind him, his strength was enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with most martial arts masters. If they were to join forces with Chu Xiu, they definitely wouldn't be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, a martial artist in a golden robe with a square and dignified face walked out from behind. Seeing that middle-aged man, Huangfu Weiming immediately thought that it was a close call. This middle-aged man was none other than Xiahou Zhen, the family leader of the Xiahou clan. Among the many martial arts masters, Xiahou Zhen was considered one of the more difficult to deal with. His spirit secret technique could catch people off guard, and the Xiahou clan's imperial spirit technique was considered one of the best spirit secret techniques. Once a conflict broke out, Xiahou Zhen could use the imperial spirit technique to fish in troubled waters and obtain many good things from them. However, they still had Lin Yi on their side. Lin Ye's mental strength wasn't inferior to a martial arts master's, and his demonic lineage's spirit secret technique wasn't weak either. They could completely restrain Xiahou Zhen. But at this time, Huangfu Weiming suddenly thought of something. It seemed that Lin Yi and Xiahou Zhen had a feud. The first time Lin Yi appeared in the underworld, he killed Xiahou Zhen's son, Xiahou Wujiang. Although Xiahou Zhen didn't only have Xiahou Wujiang as his only son, he was Xiahou Wujiang, who was once ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. He was also a disciple that Xiahou Zhen had painstakingly nurtured. In the end, he was killed by Lin Yi. As expected, Xiahou Zhen's eyes reddened the moment he saw Chu Xiu. He shouted angrily, "Lin Yi!" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "So it's Patriarch Xiahou. Long time no see. Are you here to avenge your son's death?" Xiahou Zhen gritted his teeth and said, "Not only did you kill my son, but several elites of the Xiahou clan also died in your hands. Even if you are the successor of Dugu Weiwei, I must tear you into pieces today." Previously at the Lingbao Temple, Chu Xiu had also killed several people from the Xiahou clan and the Lu clan. However, Chu Xiu didn't destroy the corpses, so he wasn't afraid of others finding out. Anyway, his identity as Lin Yi was used as a scapegoat. Killing one person was killing, and killing a group of people was also killing. There was no difference. When the surrounding people heard that Chu Xiu had killed the warriors of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan, they immediately looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look. Could it be that this fellow has some deep enmity with the Xiahou clan? Why did he always pick on the Xiahou clan? Not only did he kill Xiahou Wujiang, the most outstanding disciple of the Xiahou clan in this generation, but he also killed the elites of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan. Those people were the elites cultivated by the Xiahou clan. They were the elites of the next generation, and there might even be a martial Dao grandmaster among them. In the end, all of them had been wiped out by Lin Yi. The grudge between them was huge. Of course, this was indeed the case. Xiahou Zhen was really furious at this time. After Xiahou Wujiang was killed, although he didn't go crazy to the extent of qi deviation like Nie Renlong, he also used the power of the Xiahou clan to search for Lin Yi frantically, wanting to avenge his son. In the end, after searching for a few months, Lin Yi seemed to have disappeared from the world, and never appeared in Jianghu. It was the same when Xiahou Zhen went to investigate Lin Ye's history. This guy seemed to have jumped out of a crack in a stone. Apart from knowing that he had a close relationship with the Phaseless Demon Sect and the Yin Demon Sect, there was no trace at all. In the end, Xiahou Zhen could only give up. After all, he was the family leader of the Xiahou clan, and the elders of the Xiahou clan wouldn't allow him to focus on these things. This time when Xiaofan opened, Xiahou Zhen was actually prepared to kill Lin Yi. Since Lin Yi was an elite cultivated by the Yinma clan, he would definitely come when Xiaofan opened. If Lin Yi didn't have any demonic experts protecting him, Xiahou Zhen would definitely kill him to avenge his son. As for whether it would attract the revenge of the demonic experts, Xiahou Zhen wasn't worried at all. In this Jianghu, there was never a rule that only you can kill, and others can't kill you. Although Xiahou Zhen didn't know who was backing Lin Yi, the Xiahou clan had been one of the 9 great clans for so many years, so it wasn't like they didn't have any trump cards. Moreover, Lin Yi was from the demonic path. Once a demonic expert pressured the Xiahou clan, the Xiahou clan could also ask for help from the Ying clan of Shangshui. Although the 9 great clans weren't very harmonious, they could still maintain an attitude of cooperation in the face of external enemies. If even the Ying clan of Shangshui couldn't stop them, there were still other orthodox sections. Now that the demonic Dao was faintly showing signs of recovery, the righteous Dao sects in the Jianghu didn't want to give the demonic Dao sects even the slightest chance. If the demonic Dao really dared to threaten the Xiahou clan, the Xiahou clan's connections in the Jianghu wouldn't be helpless. However, the only thing Xiahou Zhen didn't expect was that before he could kill Lin Yi would actually kill all the elite disciples of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan first. How despicable! Just as Xiahou Zhen was about to make a move, another old Taoist entered the blissful devil palace. This person was Zhen Yangzi of the Chunyang Dao sect. Behind him was a young Taoist who was the last surviving young martial art practitioner of the Chunyang Dao sect. Zhen Yangzi's temper wasn't very good to begin with. At this moment, his face was as gloomy as water, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Looking around, Zhen Yangzi bellowed angrily, "Who killed the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect?" Outside the valley, the corpses of the 3 disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect were still placed there. The Chunyang Dao sect had always put in a lot of effort to nurture disciples. A few years ago, one of their most outstanding disciples had just been killed. Now another one had died. How could Zhen Yangzi accept this? There were some disciples who were also from the Daoist sects but didn't belong to the 3 major Daoist sects. They pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "Senior Zhen Yangzi, this is the person who killed the 3 junior brothers of the Chunyang Dao sect." Compared to Xiahou Zhen, Zhen Yangzi was much more agile. At the moment when he turned his gaze to Chu Xiu, Zhen Yangzi didn't say a word. The sword in his hand was ignited with pure yang qi, and he slashed straight at Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu didn't kill the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect, Zhen Yangzi would kill Chu Xiu if he met him. Not to mention that Chu Xiu already had a deep hatred with the Chunyang Dao sect. Zhen Yangzi didn't need to say those ruthless words to tear Chu Xiu into pieces. His actions had already proved everything. The pure yang sword aura that was as vast and hot as the sun slammed down, bringing pressure to Chu Xiu like Mount Tai. It was extremely powerful. Previously in the outside world, Zhen Yangzi was at a disadvantage when facing Yin Zhongjuan, but in fact that was because Yin Zhongjuan's strength was too strong. Zhen Yangzi was definitely at the top among the martial Dao masters of the real pellet state. At least, he was the strongest among the martial Dao masters that Chu Xiu had fought with. Chu Xiu made a gesture, and the Hell Guardian Wisdom King image appeared behind Chu Xiu. The Wisdom King's palm slammed down, suppressing the world. At the same time, it also wanted to suppress Zhen Yangzi's pure yang sword aura. However, the power of Zhen Yangzi's pure yang sword aura was simply beyond Chu Xiu's expectations. The Hell Guardian Wisdom King image was almost shattered in an instant. The sword aura fell, and the pure yang aura illuminated the world. Everything within 1,000 meters was shrouded by the hot pure yang aura. Even if Chu Xiu used the heaven's sun gazing at air technique, all he could see was a vast expanse of whiteness. There were flaws everywhere, but even the weakest point was not easily broken by the current Chu Xiu. Taking a deep breath, Chu Xiu's body suddenly exuded a strong corpse aura. The hungry ghost soul in Chu Xiu's spirit was released by Chu Xiu. In an instant, the palm-sized soul began to devour Chu Xiu's mental power and aura crazily. It grew to more than 100 meters in size. As it opened its mouth, demonic qi and corpse aura burst out, But it was not to resist, but to wrap and devour. The seemingly majestic pure yang aura was directly devoured by the hungry ghost incarnation, and the hungry ghost incarnation even pounced at Jinyangzi. It opened its mouth and devoured everything. Wherever it passed, even the aura of heaven and earth was tainted by the corpse aura, and it was finally devoured. What kind of monster is this? Jinyangzi snorted and formed a seal. Boundless aura condensed into runes that circulated in front of him. As Jinyangzi stabbed out with his sword, the runes seemed to materialize and condensed on his Dao sword. As his sword slashed down, the 100-meter-long sword aura seemed as though it was going to slash through the heavens and earth, directly slashing the hungry ghost incarnation into pieces. Jinyangzi only felt that the hungry ghost incarnation was incomparably evil, but at this moment, Daoist Guangning and the other two looked at each other with astonishment in their eyes. The thing that Lin Yi had displayed was clearly in the form of the hungry ghost. Although it did not have a physical body, it had the power of the hungry ghost to devour everything. Apart from the Six Paths Demon Lord, only the blissful demon palace had obtained the hungry ghost incarnation's secret technique. Therefore, it was impossible for Lin Yi to have obtained it from the outside world. Therefore, just a moment ago, they were still racking their brains to kill each other. However, Lin Yi had somehow obtained the opportunity to steal the hungry ghost path's secret technique. Chapter 567. Daoist Guangning and the other two recognized the origin of the hungry ghost path's secret technique. However, the three of them didn't have the intention to make a move. To Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming, killing one was one less. It was already kind of them not to add insult to injury. As for Huangfu Weiming taking the initiative to seek help from Chu Xiu, did he say anything about it? Daoist Guangning wanted to make a move, but of course, it wasn't to help Chu Xiu. Instead, it was to help Jinyangzi. After all, the two of them belonged to the same Dao sect. Moreover, the three disciples of Chunyang Dao sect had died in front of his eyes. However, Daoist Guangning could still be considered as a good person. Jinyangzi was obviously stronger than Chu Xiu. Seeing that they were working together just now, Guangning didn't add insult to injury. Of course, Chu Xiu had never counted on them. However, after using the hungry ghost path's incarnation to block Jinyangzi's sword, Chu Xiu's face that was hidden under the mask was extremely solemn. There was a problem with the hungry ghost path's secret technique that Yu Xian gave him. Actually, it wasn't the hungry ghost path's secret technique that had a problem. It was Chu Xiu's own realm that had a problem. Those who cultivated the hungry ghost path's secret technique, be it the Six Paths Demon Lord or the half-human half-ghost Yu Xian, were actually much stronger than Chu Xiu. Therefore, when Chu Xiu used the hungry ghost path's incarnation, the other party immediately tried to absorb Chu Xiu's mental strength and astral energy. Its greedy devouring characteristic simply didn't differentiate between friend and foe. If Chu Xiu wasn't careful, the other party could even absorb all of his energy. However, after stepping into the martial master realm, this kind of thing would be slower. Therefore, when Chu Xiu used the hungry ghost path's incarnation, it could be said to be extremely dangerous. Although it didn't consume as much energy as using the 7 demon blade, it was still more dangerous. This way, even though Chu Xiu had quite a number of trump cards, the awkward thing was that he basically couldn't use them casually. The pure yang astral energy around Jinyangzi burned intensely, as if the sun had descended. Looking at Chu Xiu coldly, Jinyangzi said in a cold voice, "You evil brat, you are vicious and merciless. Cultivating these evil cultivation techniques, who knows how many people you have killed. Today, even if I don't avenge my Chunyang Dao sect's disciple, I will kill you and rid the Jianghu of evil." As soon as he finished speaking, Jinyangzi made his move again. The sword in his hand split into over 1,000 sword shadows that released boundless pure yang astral energy in the air. In the end, it actually turned into an incomparably majestic sword formation. It turned into a meteor of light that fell from the sky with an incomparably powerful might. On the other side, Xiahozhen also moved. He formed a seal with his hand, and golden light shone around him. The boundless power of his soul turned into a storm that swept over with the power of the world. The Xiahou clan's spirit control art used one soul to control people in the initial stage. However, once it was cultivated to the full mastery stage, it would control the world. Chu Xiu was targeted by two martial Dao grandmasters at the same time. Furthermore, they were powerhouses like Xiahou and Zhenyangzi. Even an ordinary martial Dao grandmaster would not be able to withstand them, let alone Chu Xiu's heaven and human oneness. Chu Xiu's hand was on the hatred saber, but his attention was focused on the area behind the blissful demon palace. Be it Xiahou or Zhenyangzi, he could barely withstand one of them. Now that there were two of them, Chu Xiu's only way out was to escape. He could only hope that the hatred saber was powerful enough to give him a chance to escape. Just when Chu Xiu was about to attack with his saber, a figure in a black robe came from behind. Boundless, turbulent demon qi shrouded Xiahou, transforming into countless asuras that danced around him, eroding his will. In an instant, Xiahou was alarmed. He could no longer care about attacking Chu Xiu. Instead, he condensed all the power of his soul around him, and the endless golden light of his soul shone. Only then did he disperse all the asuras. Sky Demon Formless Technique. It's a demon from the Phaseless Demon Sect. The Phaseless Demon Sect was a large sect of the lurking devil lineage, and they often stirred up trouble. They were quite famous in the underworld. Although Xiahou had never interacted with the Phaseless Devil Sect before, he had still heard of the Phaseless Devil Sect's Sky Devil Phaseless Mystic Technique. The martial artist from the Phaseless Demon Sect who suddenly attacked was Mr. Liu. At this moment, Mr. Liu had already stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Although he had just stepped into this realm not long ago, his strength was not much weaker than Xiahou's. They were all martial Dao Grandmasters, but some people had different accumulations in the unity of heaven and man realm. Their strength after stepping into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm was naturally different. For example, people like Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian could compete with martial Dao Grandmasters when they were in the unity of heaven and man realm. When they stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, they would naturally be the best among those in the same realm. Mr. Liu was also such an existence. Although he was slightly older than Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian and the others, his accumulation was also extremely shocking. There were actually not many people who could accumulate such strength in the unity of heaven and man realm. Other than the top 5 on the Longhu leaderboard, among the people that Chu Xiu had met, Mr. Liu was one of them. The former Heavenly Sin branch leader was also one of them. Although the Heavenly Sin branch leader had once tricked Chu Xiu, the other party's strength was indeed strong enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the confidant of the Blue Dragon Society's big dragon head, Butian Nan. At this moment, on Chu Xiu's side, Mr. Liu helped Chu Xiu block Xiahou. Seeing this, Chu Xiu immediately let go of the hand that was holding the hatred saber. Instead, his qi and blood burned, and the boundless demonic qi and qi fused into one, turning into an extremely evil demon Buddha of Massacre. The demon Buddha of Massacre held the blood saber in his hand and slashed down. The boundless demonic qi and blood burned, and directly broke the pure yang sword formation, causing a series of loud explosions. Chu Xiu's face was slightly pale. Previously, when he used the demon Buddha of Massacre, he used the demonic blood technique to absorb other people's qi and blood. This time, he used his own qi and blood. Although his strength was slightly stronger, the feeling of using his own qi and blood was not a good feeling. Mr. Liu walked to Chu Xiu's side and sneered at Xiahou and Zhenyangzi. Two famous martial Dao grandmasters teamed up to deal with a junior. And you guys have the cheek to call yourselves the righteous path of martial arts. Do you guys still care about the rules? Don't you have any shame? I'm ashamed for you guys. Zhenyangzi said coldly. Why do we need to care about the rules of the pugilistic world with you demons? Are you even worthy to talk about the rules of the pugilistic world? Zhenyangzi's words were extremely overbearing and unreasonable. Mr. Liu sneered and said, Good. As expected of the so-called righteous sections. This shamelessness is something our demonic path can't compare to. Mr. Liu turned his head and transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu. I say, you're really good at stirring up trouble. How long has it been? And you've already provoked two guys that you can't afford to offend. Chu Xiu spread his hands helplessly and said, Xiahou is an old grudge. However, you also know the Chunyang Dao Sect's character. They have a foul mouth. If they want to kill me, I can't just let them kill me, right? Mr. Lu transmitted his voice secretly. Later I'll hold Xiaohozhen back. You find a chance to escape. This time in Xiaofan, the number of people from the demonic path is not as many as the righteous path. Especially the people from the hidden devil lineage. Many people did not come due to various reasons. At the very least, we can't find any reinforcements in the surroundings. Chu Xiu nodded. He was not an idiot. Of course, he knew when to fight head-on and when to escape. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Xiaohozhen teamed up with Zhenyangzi. Even if Mr. Lu intervened, the situation was still very bad. Mr. Lu's black robe fluttered, and a surging demonic qi burst out. He looked at Mayor Xiaoho and smiled. I've long heard that the Xiaoho clan's imperial spirit technique is unparalleled in the world. I don't know how it compares with my phaseless demon sect's demonic formless technique. Bullying the younger generation is nothing. Patriarch Xiaoho, your opponent is me. Xiaohozhen sneered. You're just a nobody who has just stepped into the real pellet state. If it was your phaseless demon sect Situli who said that, you think you're worthy? Mr. Lu squinted his eyes and said, You'll know whether I'm worthy or not later. As soon as he said that, the boundless demonic qi around Mr. Lu roared and surged. The black demonic qi evolved into a demonic flame shura, which appeared behind Mr. Lu. Using his palm as a blade, Mr. Lu slashed forward, and the demonic flame shura behind him also slashed. In an instant, the demonic qi affected heaven and earth. Xiaohozhen's body suddenly fell into boundless darkness. He couldn't see the slightest light, but he could feel the powerful blade filled with demonic qi. True and false, false and real, the demonic formless technique was both real and illusory. Everyone cultivated it in a different way. The demonic formless technique that Mr. Lu cultivated was a combination of illusion and flesh, shattering the soul. Xiaohozhen was also a famous martial Dao master for a long time, so he naturally wouldn't be defeated so easily by Mr. Lu. No matter what, I'll break it with my own strength. Specks of golden divine light gathered around Xiaohozhen's body. His primordial spirit affected heaven and earth, turning into a storm. As Xiaohozhen punched out, the energy storm tore apart the sky and the earth, tearing apart the boundless darkness. Between Xiaohozhen and Mr. Lu, one had a foundation, while the other had talent. Therefore, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. As for Zhenyangzi, he didn't say anything and released the pure yang sword aura, directly attacking Chu Xiu. A fierce look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. The demonic flames around him were monstrous, but he didn't retreat. All the demonic qi and killing intent around him gathered together, and he used the annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. At the same time, the fist aura also carried a powerful aura that could destroy all laws, and the fist intent was unparalleled. The killing fist collided with the pure yang sword aura. The blazing pure yang sword aura was the best at restraining attributes such as demonic qi and demonic qi. Not to mention that Chu Xiu's strength was weaker than Zhenyangzi's. So under the collision, Chu Xiu's fist intent shattered, and the pure yang sword aura entered his body, causing Chu Xiu to spit out a mouthful of blood. However, after the blood was spat out, it burned intensely, rapidly turning into a layer of blood mist that condensed around Chu Xiu's body, causing his speed to increase drastically. He bypassed Zhenyangzi and appeared beside the last young warrior from Chunyang Dao sect. The annihilating heaven and earth annihilating soul shifting technique was used. Before the young warrior from Chunyang Dao sect could say a word, he was already completely under Chu Xiu's control. Chu Xiu grabbed the neck of the warrior from Chunyang Dao sect with his hand, which was tainted with demonic qi, and said to Zhenyangzi with a sinister smile, "Old fart, don't you want to kill me? If you aren't afraid that the young elites of Chunyang Dao sect will be annihilated, then kill me." Chapter 568. In Zhenyangzi's mind, when a junior from the diabolism like Lin Yi encountered him, the only choice he could make was to flee like a rat and do his best to snatch a chance of survival from his hands. This was already not easy. Zhenyangzi had never expected that Lin Yi would be so daring as to do the opposite and even threaten a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. Pointing at Chu Xiu, Zhenyangzi's hand trembled in anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Using a junior as a threat? You demons from the diabolism are always so despicable and shameless. Let go of Ningzhen. Otherwise, the Chunyang Dao sect will definitely use all the strength of the entire sect to make you die a graveless death. Chu Xiu sneered and said, I'm despicable and shameless to attack a junior. Don't forget, in terms of seniority, I'm the same as this little Taoist. Why didn't you call me despicable and shameless when you two seniors besieged me just now? Didn't you talk about the rules? So, your so-called rules are only for me? Zhen Yangzi was instantly speechless. In fact, everyone present felt the same. Based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed just now, everyone subconsciously did not treat him as a junior martial artist. Instead, they regarded him as a martial Dao grandmaster. Holding the neck of the little Taoist Ningzhen, Chu Xiu said faintly, All right, don't talk so much. Old thing, retreat 5 kilometers and I'll let this kid live. Otherwise, the Chunyang Dao sect will really have no one in the next generation. The disciple that the Chunyang Dao sect had previously cultivated had been killed by Li Feilian. This had already caused some damage to the Chunyang Dao sect. After all, with the harsh cultivation method of the Chunyang Dao sect, it was not easy to cultivate such a young martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. However, although that person was dead, Chunyang Dao sect still had some foundation. These 4 were the more outstanding ones among the younger generation of Chunyang Dao sect. However, if the 4 of them were to die, Chunyang Dao sect would not only have no one in the younger generation, but it could also be said that there were not many outstanding ones. They could only choose the best among the dwarves. This was not good news for the next generation of Chunyang Dao sect. A conflicted look appeared on Zhen Yangzi's face. With his temper, he would definitely exterminate all of these demons. He would even sacrifice his own people for that. But for the sake of the sect, he couldn't bring himself to be so ruthless. After a while, Zhen Yangzi said coldly, What if I withdraw, but you kill Ningzhen? I don't dare to believe the words of you people from the Devil Dao, nor will I believe them. Chu Xiu said faintly, Don't worry, I Chu Xiu am a man of my word. I will never lie to you. Don't think that I'm from the Devil Dao. My words are much more trustworthy than your so-called righteous martial arts world. Zhen Yangzi's face was as gloomy as water. He snorted coldly and said, All right, I'll believe you this time. If anything happens to Ningzhen, I'll definitely tear you into pieces. Just as Zhen Yangzi was about to leave, Ningzhen, who had been controlled by Chu Xiu's soul-shifting technique, was struggling in Chu Xiu's hands. The scorching pure yang energy burned continuously along with his qi and blood. Ningzhen had actually relied on his subconscious to burn his own qi and blood to break free from Chu Xiu's soul-shifting technique. Chu Xiu's mental energy was now far greater than most martial Dao masters. If Ningzhen wanted to break free from the soul-shifting technique's control, he had no other choice but to fight with his life. Even Chu Xiu hadn't expected such a violent move. He had actually managed to break through the shackles of his spiritual power in a split second. Ningzhen shouted at Zhen Yangzi, Uncle Master, there's killing intent in his spiritual will. He's lying to you. Don't worry about me. Kill this Devil Dao. Before Ningzhen could finish speaking, the demonic qi in Chu Xiu's hands exploded. He exerted force and instantly broke Ningzhen's neck. Throwing Ningzhen's corpse aside, Chu Xiu shook his head helplessly and said, Why bother? Isn't it good to be a little muddle-headed? At least you can die more comfortably. Ningzhen was right. Chu Xiu was lying to Zhen Yangzi. He had killed 3 disciples of Chunyang Dao sect. Whether he killed one more or one less, it made no difference to Chu Xiu. Since there was enmity, he had to kill all the other parties' future hopes. However, the only thing Chu Xiu did not expect was that this disciple of Chunyang Dao sect had such a violent personality. Looking at Chu Xiu, Zhen Yangzi's eyes turned red. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Countless blood mist condensed into runes in midair and attached to the Dao sword in his hand. At the same time, the extreme pure yang astral energy gathered around Zhen Yangzi. It was compressed to the extreme and condensed on the Dao sword. In an instant, the Dao sword was like the descending sun, shining brightly. The Zhen Yangzi slashed down, and the Dao sword flew out of his hand. A wave of killing intent condensed and locked onto Chu Xiu. It was the demon-subduing Dao pattern carved with Zhen Yangzi's blood essence. The sword would not return to its scabbard until it drank demonic blood. At that moment, Chu Xiu instantly felt an extreme sense of crisis. The pure yang astral energy on the Dao sword had been compressed and condensed to the extreme. Although it was only a thin layer, it was comparable to the blazing sun. Everywhere it passed, even the essence qi of heaven and earth was burning. This time, Chu Xiu had really infuriated Jin Yangzi. Even this senior martial Dao master, who had been famous for a long time, was prepared to use a secret technique that would consume his blood essence to kill Chu Xiu. One could imagine how furious Jin Yangzi was. The heaven's sun gazing at air had been cast to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The dense demonic qi and blood mist was also wrapped around Chu Xiu. Together with the internal binding seal, Chu Xiu's speed had exploded to the extreme, but the effect was minimal. With Chu Xiu's current mental strength that surpassed most martial Dao masters, he could see the trajectory of the Dao sword and dodge it in advance. However, the Dao sword was locked onto him. No matter how many times he dodged, the Dao sword was like a maggot attached to a bone, slashing towards him at high speed. Even if Chu Xiu's speed was a little slower, the scorching pure yang astral energy on the Dao sword would suppress the demonic qi around Chu Xiu and gradually weaken Chu Xiu's power. As a martial Dao master, Jin Yangzi hated Chu Xiu to the core at this time. He could no longer care about his own reputation or the subsequent fight in Xiaofan. This time he wanted to exhaust Chu Xiu to death, using his own foundation to exhaust Chu Xiu to death. Even though Chu Xiu's explosive power was comparable to most martial Dao masters, he had not condensed the martial Dao true core yet. After all, he had not condensed the martial Dao true core yet. Every bit of power he used would be less. In the end, the first one who could not hold on would still be him, Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not turn around, but his hand was already on the handle of the hatred saber. However, Chu Xiu was still hesitating. Should he use the 7-demon saber, or use the hungry ghost Dao incarnation to fight with his life on the line? At this time, Jin Yangzi also stared at Chu Xiu with a gloomy expression, focusing all his attention on Chu Xiu. He knew that Chu Xiu had a trump card, and he also knew that Chu Xiu would not give up so easily. Therefore, he was also waiting for Chu Xiu to take out all his trump cards and defeat him in one fell swoop, letting him feel what despair was. However, at this moment, Jin Yangzi's heart skipped a beat. His perception did not actually sense anything. It was just a kind of sixth sense that came to him on a whim. It was a kind of crisis instinct that he had developed after so many years of killing in the underworld. Should he trust his perception or his instinct? At this moment, Jin Yangzi subconsciously chose the latter. He no longer controlled the principal sword. Instead, with the support of his pure yang energy, his speed exploded to the extreme, and he dodged to the side. At the same time, he formed a seal with his hand, wanting to use a secret technique to defend himself. However, he had only formed half of the seal when a silver flying dagger had already brushed past his body. Jin Yangzi's incomparably powerful protective gang energy was like air in front of the flying dagger. It had no resistance at all. A silver light flashed, and the flying dagger pierced straight into the ground. There was no sound of gang energy exploding, but the flying dagger had already disappeared. Even the crowd's perception could not detect it. One could imagine how deep the flying dagger had pierced into the ground. It had to be at least a few 100 feet deep. "It's you, Li Feilian." Jin Yangzi suppressed the shock in his heart and looked at a martial artist behind him. The martial artist did not look young or old. He should be in his 30s. His appearance was ordinary, extremely ordinary. He was definitely the kind of person that would not stand out in a crowd. He was wearing an extremely ordinary black robe with a belt casually wrapped around his waist. There were also 9 flying daggers on the belt. Including the previous one, he actually only had a total of 10 daggers. The flying dagger on his waist was very ordinary, just like him. The blade was 7 inches long, and the handle was as long as a finger. It seemed to be made of ordinary steel. Although it was shiny, there was not a single pattern on it. It was extremely simple. However, it was such an extremely simple flying dagger that had almost severely injured Jin Yangzi, a martial Dao master. At this time, when everyone present heard Jin Yangzi's words, they turned their heads to look at the extremely ordinary man. They could not imagine that this was the former 4th on the Longhu leaderboard and currently ranked 6th, Li Feilian. If Zhen Yangzi did not speak, even if this person was carrying a flying dagger, no one present would have associated him with Li Feilian. Among the top 10 martial artists on the Longhu leaderboard, Li Feilian had made the least attacks. However, he was also the most legendary. He killed one person with every strike. The only person he killed with 2 strikes was the genius disciple of the pure Yang Daoist sect of this generation. He had killed one of the important figures of the pure Yang Daoist sect in the future. Hence, he was hunted down by the pure Yang Daoist sect. Li Feilian hadn't appeared in Jianghu for several years. Seeing him at this time, the people present still couldn't believe it. After all, extraordinary people had extraordinary things. In their opinion, a legendary figure like Li Feilian shouldn't be so ordinary. However, Li Feilian was really so ordinary. Chapter 569. Everyone in Jianghu knew about the grudge between Li Feilian and Chunyang Dao sect, but in fact, everyone knew that it was not Li Feilian's fault. Instead, it was Chunyang Dao sect's fault, but they would not say so. As one of the top 10 on the Longhu list, Li Feilian's identity was very mysterious. Even Wind-Sweeping Tower had only vaguely dug out some simple information about Li Feilian, but they did not know more details. The news about Li Feilian that Wind-Sweeping Tower released to the outside world was very simple. His ancestor was one of the strongest in Jianghu before the great calamity of the ancient times. The flying knife in his hand never missed its target, and it even involved space, karma, and other supreme martial arts. This lineage had always been a single lineage. It was neither righteous, demonic, nor evil. It rarely participated in the disputes in Jianghu, and it was extremely low-key. However, occasionally, a successor would appear, and his strength was extremely strong. Li Feilian's style was the same as his ancestors for many generations. He was also very low-key. In fact, all the people he had killed had taken the initiative to cause trouble for him. He had never caused trouble for anyone else. Li Feilian was not even willing to provoke those ordinary martial arts practitioners, let alone the young geniuses of Chunyang Dao sect. In fact, everyone in Jianghu knew how Chunyang Dao sect behaved. In everyone's opinion, the reason why Li Feilian killed people was probably that the person from Chunyang Dao sect had angered Li Feilian, and that was why Li Feilian killed people. However, there were many things in Jianghu that could not be judged based on right or wrong. Even if Li Feilian was not wrong, he was the one who killed people, and Chunyang Dao sect wanted to kill him to avenge their disciple. Over the years, Chunyang Dao sect had been tracking down Li Feilian's whereabouts, but they had not found him. Li Feilian had not appeared in the eyes of Jianghu people all these years because of the pursuit of Chunyang Dao sect. This was the first time he showed up, and as soon as he appeared, he gave Zhen Yangzi a big gift. In a short period of time, Zhen Yangzi had encountered 2 of Chunyang Dao sect's biggest enemies. However, before Zhen Yangzi could say anything, Li Feilian made another move. Li Feilian did not mind that his sneak attack had failed to injure Zhen Yangzi. After all, his flying daggers were not meant for sneak attacks. In an instant, 3 flying daggers flew out of his hands. There was no powerful stellar energy, nor was there any dazzling power. They were just 3 ordinary silver beams of divine light. Zhen Yangzi coldly snorted. At this moment, his Dao sword was slashing towards Chu Xiu, so he did not have a weapon in his hand. However, it did not matter. Zhen Yangzi used his finger as a sword and shot out his pure yang astral energy, turning into a sky full of sword light that blocked in front of him. However, Li Feilian's 3 flying daggers underwent a strange change at this moment. In mid-air, the 3 flying daggers were faintly discernible. The void seemed to have been folded, and the dense pure yang sword qi seemed to have pierced into the air. As for the 3 flying daggers, they were locked onto Zhen Yangzi from 3 different directions. This gave Zhen Yangzi a very strange feeling. No matter how he dodged, the 3 flying daggers seemed to be able to hit him. Seeing this scene, everyone present suddenly thought of Wind-Sweeping Building's evaluation of Li Feilian in the past. This person's martial Dao legacy involved the supreme rules of space and even karma. Currently, in the Jianghu, there were only 2 young martial artists who were qualified to come into contact with such rules. One was Fang Qishao, and the other was Chu Xiu. These 2 people had once competed in the Dao of Karma on the arena of Floating Jade Mountain. And now, Li Feilian was the 3rd one. Zhen Yangzi's eyes revealed a strong murderous intent. When it came to enmity with Chunyang Dao sect, Li Feilian's was deeper than Chu Xiu's. Li Feilian had killed the most outstanding disciple of this generation in Chunyang Dao sect, and Chunyang Dao sect had been hunting Li Feilian all over the Jianghu, forcing Li Feilian to not dare to step into the Jianghu for several years. Now that Li Feilian was not dead, Chunyang Dao sect would only have one more enemy at the unity of heaven and man realm. However, with Li Feilian's speed of improvement, Chunyang Dao sect would have one more martial Dao Grandmaster level enemy in the future. Of course, be it Li Feilian or Lin Yi, they were both targets that Zhen Yangzi had to kill. Zhen Yangzi held the demon suppression seal in his hand, and his pure yang energy surged. As the seal fell, it directly enveloped the 3 flying daggers in an attempt to suppress them. However, the strange thing was that there was a wave of fluctuation coming from Li Feilian's flying daggers. As the power trembled rapidly, the pure yang energy melted away, unable to block the power of the flying daggers at all. Just now, it was this kind of blade that easily broke through the protective aura of Zhen Yangzi, a martial Dao Grandmaster, and almost seriously injured him. Seeing this, Zhen Yangzi knitted his brows tightly. At this moment, the pure Yang Dao sword was still fighting with Lin Yi. With the support of the demon suppression Dao pattern, the power of the pure Yang Dao sword would not be weakened by much even if he did not use his power for the time being. Right now, Zhen Yangzi did not have a weapon in his hand, so this should be his weakest period. Facing Li Feilian's blade that seemed to be unable to defend at all, even Zhen Yangzi felt that it was troublesome. However, Zhen Yangzi was after all a martial Dao Grandmaster of the older generation. Even if he did not have a weapon in his hand, he would not be easily forced into a dead end by a junior like Li Feilian. When the 3 flying daggers were about to reach him, a golden light surged around Zhen Yangzi's body. It was extremely firm and yang, making Zhen Yangzi look like a golden-armored deity. He pointed out with his sword fingers, clashing with 2 of the flying daggers. A powerful force immediately erupted, and the 2 flying daggers were directly shattered by the golden light. At the same time, Zhen Yangzi chanted the demon suppression mantra. Waves of ripples surged in the void, and the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in front of him was constantly vibrating. No matter how the flying daggers changed their laws, their power was completely dispersed, and they directly fell to the ground. Daoist Guangning, who was watching the battle at the side, exclaimed, "It's the Chunyang Dao sect's Yang extreme mystic technique. When did Daoist Zhen Yangzi cultivate this technique?" Everyone knew that the Buddhist golden body was unparalleled in the world, and it was the pinnacle existence of all the body-tempering techniques in the pugilistic world. However, they did not know that the sect also had countless body-tempering techniques. When cultivated to great success, it would not be inferior to the various Buddhist golden bodies. However, the martial artists of the Dao sect preferred peace and inaction. Very few people would choose to cultivate this kind of body-tempering technique, unless they were really good at it. Zhen Yangzi was an old man in the pugilistic world. In fact, he was already close to the stage where his qi and blood were declining. No one would have thought that he would actually spend so much effort to cultivate this kind of body-tempering technique. At this moment, Daoist Guangning was also hesitating. Should he help Zhen Yangzi? If he didn't help, they all belonged to the same lineage of the 3 great Dao sects. Seeing Zhen Yangzi fighting with his life on the line, Daoist Guangning also couldn't bear to watch. However, if he helped, he would also be tainted with karma. Moreover, this matter had nothing to do with him. Yu Qifeng, who was at the side, transmitted a message to Daoist Guangning, telling him not to interfere and to calmly watch the development of the matter. On the other hand, at this moment, Zhen Yangzi, who'd blocked 3 of Li Feilian's flying daggers in succession, sneered. However, Li Feilian didn't even bother to speak or ridicule Zhen Yangzi. Instead, he took out a flying dagger and slid it through his meridians. Blood instantly gushed out, but the flying dagger was dyed blood red. 5 flying daggers that were stained with Li Feilian's blood shot out in a straight line towards Zhen Yangzi. The blood-red line connected the 5 flying daggers together. Although they seemed to be separated, there was a faint karmic connection between them. The moment the daggers shot out, there was even a faint image of ghosts and gods wailing, causing Zhen Yangzi's primordial spirit to feel a trace of coldness. These 5 daggers didn't just slash at Zhenyangzi's body. They also slashed at his 3 flowers above the head and the 5 qi in his body. At this moment, Chu Xiu was still entangled with the pure Yang Dao sword. Without Zhenyangzi's control, a demon-subduing formation that was powered by qi and blood couldn't do anything to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had seen Li Feilian's series of attacks just now. He had to admit that Li Feilian was really a character. He only had 10 sabers. His first sneak attack had failed, and the next 3 had been blocked by Zhenyangzi. When he attacked again, he used the secret technique of burning his blood essence. He was ready to fight with his life on the line. Li Feilian still had one last dagger in his hand. However, Chu Xiu guessed that the last dagger was Li Feilian's life. Once the dagger was used, he would lose his life. After attacking 3 times, Li Feilian revealed all his trump cards and risked his life. Under Li Feilian's seemingly cold and ordinary appearance, there was an extreme madness hidden. From the moment he appeared until now, Li Feilian didn't even say a word. There was no killing intent or hatred in his eyes when he looked at Zhenyangzi. It was as if killing Zhenyangzi was just a mission for him, a stage that he had to go through in life. It was incomparably natural. In the Jianghu, people like Li Feilian were usually ruthless and quiet. People like Li Feilian were the hardest to deal with, and the hardest to provoke. A person who could fight to the death with bloodshot eyes was actually not scary. What was scary was people like Li Feilian. He had clearly decided to fight to the death with you, but you still didn't know it and continued to resist calmly. At this moment, Zhenyangzi was in such a state. Although he wasn't calm, he didn't expect Li Feilian's attacks to be so unpredictable. Just now, he only attacked with 3 daggers to test Zhenyangzi's strength. Now it was a killing move? The 5 blood daggers didn't just slash at Zhenyangzi's physical body, but also the 5 qi in his body. Although Zhenyangzi cultivated the extreme yang mysterious technique, and his physical body wasn't weak, in the face of such a strange attack, it was a pity that it was a little too late even if Zhenyangzi put on a desperate stance. In the midst of the golden pure yang qi, Zhenyangzi's strength was condensed to the extreme. A smear of blood rose and turned into a demon-subduing seal that condensed in his palm. With a palm strike, a flying dagger was directly shattered. It seemed like he had casually shattered the 5 flying daggers, but Zhenyangzi couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His mysterious technique was broken and his face turned pale. Although the daggers were shattered, the saber intent slashed into Zhenyangzi's body without any hindrance and slashed at his internal organs and 5 qi. Chapter 570. Zhenyangzi was a martial Dao grandmaster of the older generation, yet he was injured by a junior like Li Feilian. This was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Although Zhenyangzi was injured because he was chasing Lin Yi with all his might, and did not even have his weapon with him, an injury was an injury. There was no good excuse. When Chu Xiu saw the scene of Zhenyangzi being injured from behind, his eyes immediately revealed a cold glint. The pure Yang Dao sword was still entangled with Chu Xiu, but in the next moment, the demonic aura around Chu Xiu had already erupted to the extreme, fusing with killing intent and evil spirit. He executed the heaven-extinguishing earth-obliterating selfless killing fist. As the fist landed, an unparalleled fist aura blasted on the pure Yang Dao sword, causing the demon-suppressing Dao pattern on it to tremble and then shatter. A weapon without a master was just an inanimate object. Zhenyangzi was probably thinking too much if he wanted to rely on an inanimate object to hold him back. Previously, Chu Xiu did not make a move because he wanted to preserve his last bit of strength and wait for an opportunity. Now the opportunity had come. After defeating the pure Yang Dao sword, Chu Xiu's hand was already on the hatred saber as he rushed towards Zhenyangzi. Seeing that Lin Yi still dared to have any ideas on him, Zhenyangzi could not help but be enraged. Did the 2 juniors, Li Feilian and Lin Yi, really think that he was a pushover? Powerful and majestic pure yang energy erupted from Zhenyangzi's body. Even though his internal organs and 5 qis had been injured, the power that erupted in that instant was still shocking to others. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu did not care about Zhenyangzi's actions at all. He did not attack first, but instead transformed nearly half of his mental strength into the soul-annihilating arrow, and shot it with his mind, heading straight for Zhenyangzi. The soul-annihilating arrow was an incomparably overbearing essence spirit secret technique that followed the path of extreme lethality. It was incomparably ferocious, and there was no other way but to resist it. It was very risky to use the soul-destroying arrow before using the 7 demon swords, but for Chu Xiu, he would only do so if he was at least 60% confident. The invisible arrow brought with it a majestic pressure as it headed straight for Zhen Yangzi's mind. Not long ago, Chu Xiu had used this soul-extinguishing arrow to injure Su Xing's spirit. Against Zhen Yangzi, this soul-extinguishing arrow was just as domineering. Although Zhen Yangzi's mental energy wasn't weak, his pure yang energy was clearly unable to completely negate the power of the soul-extinguishing arrow. Coupled with the fact that he had been heavily injured by Li Feilian earlier, when the soul-extinguishing arrow shot towards him, even though Zhen Yangzi had used all his strength to block it, his mental energy was still injured by the soul-extinguishing arrow, causing Zhen Yangzi to let out a muffled groan, pain and madness appearing in his eyes. The martial artists who were watching from the side were completely stunned. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu and Li Feilian would actually put Zhen Yangzi in such a difficult position? Although the two of them didn't join hands, their attacks came one after another, not giving Zhen Yangzi any room to breathe. Initially, Daoist Guangming didn't intend to interfere in this matter. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming also didn't suggest for him to interfere. However, now that Daoist Guangming noticed that something was amiss, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Although he didn't have much of a relationship with Zhen Yangzi, they were both from the 3 Dao sects. Daoist Guangming couldn't just watch Zhen Yangzi die here. However, before Daoist Guangming could make a move, Chu Xiu had already made his move. While Zhen Yangzi's mental energy was heavily injured, Chu Xiu made his move. The saber was unsheathed, filled with hatred. Hate the heavens, hate the earth, hate the people, hate himself. When that saber slashed out, an extreme amount of negative energy exploded. Hatred was the easiest way to explode one's incomparable potential. It was also the easiest way to cause one to sink into madness. The 7 demon saber harmed others but also oneself. When the hatred saber was unsheathed, it triggered the hatred in Chu Xiu's heart. It was Zhen Yangzi's hatred and everyone else's hatred. The moment the hatred saber was unsheathed, the hearts of the martial artists who saw the hatred saber were already affected. Their eyes were slightly red as they panted heavily. In the pugilistic world, killing and hatred were unavoidable. As long as one had hatred in his heart, he would be affected by the hatred saber. The hatred saber slashed out. A black saber radiance tore through the sky. The golden pure yang astral qi around Zhen Yangzi was completely stained black. Even his eyes were gradually losing their luster, leaving behind only a crazy amount of hatred. The strongest point of the 7 demon saber wasn't its attack power, but its ability to trigger an extreme emotion. Although Zhen Yangzi was from a Daoist sect, he had hatred in his heart. A lot of hatred. He hated Li Feilian for killing the genius disciple of his Chunyang Dao sect. He hated Chu Xiu for slaughtering the elites of his Chunyang Dao sect. He also hated himself for being incompetent and not being able to wipe out the evil spirits in the world. He hated even more that in his generation, the Chunyang Dao sect was gradually going downhill. They were unable to regain the glory of their ancestors and had shamed their ancestors. These were all obsessions. Coupled with the fact that he'd been heavily injured by Chu Xiu earlier, these deep-rooted obsessions instantly erupted, causing him to seem as if he'd gone mad. He'd lost all reason, and he didn't put up any defense as he welcomed Chu Xiu's hateful blade with all his might. The black saber radiance tore through everything. It tore apart the astral qi around Zhen Yangzi's body and left a huge, hideous wound on his chest. He was sent flying 1,000 feet away and fell to the ground like a rag doll. The power of the hatred saber. The more you hate it, the more powerful the hatred saber would be. It could even be said that Zhen Yangzi was responsible for at least half of the power of the saber. Zhen Yangzi, who was lying on the ground, had the last glimmer of clarity in his eyes. However, Chu Xiu's saber had robbed him of all his vitality. In the end, Zhen Yangzi did not even have the chance to say a word before he lost all signs of life. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. It took him a great deal of willpower to put the hatred saber back into its sheath, suppressing the boundless hatred in his heart. In an instant, the surroundings were incomparably silent. Even the battle between Xiahou and Mr. Lu had slowed down, and everyone looked at Chu Xiu with astonished gazes. This Lin Yi actually killed Jin Yangzi. Although part of the credit for Jin Yangzi's death was due to Li Feilian, Jin Yangzi had died by Lin Yi's saber. There was no doubt that Lin Yi brought them the greatest shock. It was not rare for a oneness of heaven and man to kill a martial Dao master. There was Zhang Qingjin and Chu Xiu. Even a few on the Longhu leaderboard, such as Zhong Xian, Feng Qishao, and Ying Bailu, actually had the strength to kill ordinary martial Dao masters. However, there was a gap between martial Dao masters. Jin Yangzi was famous in the underworld. Even among the older generation of martial artists, he was considered one of the best. However, he had died by Lin Yi's hands today. To be more precise, he had died by the hands of Lin Yi and Li Feilian, two martial artists of the younger generation. This had shocked everyone present to the point that they were speechless. At that moment, everyone saw Li Feilian slowly take out another 9 flying daggers from the secret space box and insert them into his belt. This caused everyone to be stunned. Did this mean that Li Feilian had more than 10 daggers? Chu Xiu understood. Li Feilian's flying daggers were really ordinary. They were not even treasured weapons. His strength did not lie in the flying daggers themselves, but in the person who used them. He only carried 10 daggers with him because with his current strength, he could only use 10 daggers. After that, even if he had 100 more flying daggers on him, they would be useless. After packing up, Li Feilian turned around and left. No one present stopped him, nor did anyone say anything. However, it was only then that everyone seemed to realize that Li Feilian was also a ruthless person. From the moment he appeared until now, he had only one goal: to kill Jin Yangzi. He did not even say a single word. Now that Jin Yangzi had been killed, he had left as well. It was as clean as it could get. Chu Xiu secretly shot a glance at Lu Fengxian. Then he turned around and left the blissful demon palace. Although Chu Xiu had killed Jin Yangzi, he had expended a lot of his energy. He was almost at the end of his rope, especially his mental strength. Because he had used the soul-extinguishing arrow and the hatred blade, he had used up all his mental strength. Ever since he entered the Xiaofan sky, Chu Xiu had used his mental strength in too many places. He had used up his mental strength many times. Most of the time, Chu Xiu was recovering his mental strength. Now Chu Xiu's condition was not good. Therefore, even though he knew that there were still many treasures in the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not have the time to search for them. He could only remind Lu Fengxian to take action now and seize the initiative. Taoist Guangning was considered a kind person. However, he had killed Jin Yangzi, who was also from the 3 great Dao sects. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were not easy to deal with. If Chu Xiu continued to stay here and fight with them, they would not hold back. Indeed, after Chu Xiu left, Taoist Guangning was still holding the horsetail whisk and Dao sword in his hands. He subconsciously wanted to stop him. However, in the end he sighed and gave up. Jin Yangzi was already dead. What was the use of stopping him now? Actually, Taoist Guangning was prepared to help. However, who would have thought that Lin Ye's attack was too fast? He killed Jin Yangzi with a single slash, not giving him a chance to help at all. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were happy to see this. Lin Yi escaped with heavy injuries. Of the 2 martial Dao grandmasters who came in, one was dead, and the other was still fighting with Mr. Lu. No matter how they looked at it, they would not be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, there was a commotion below. It turned out that Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng had already started attacking the armory's formation, snatching the cultivation methods and treasures within. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming immediately snorted coldly. This group of juniors was quite fast. However, most of the items in the blissful demon palace still belonged to them, the martial Dao grandmasters. With that thought in mind, Yu Qifeng and the other 2 also entered the fray. The entire blissful demon palace instantly became a mess. Mr. Lu and Xiahou stopped at the same time. Mr. Lu sneered at Xiahou. Patriarch Xiahou, I wonder if you still think that I'm qualified to fight with you. Chapter 571. Xiahou expression was gloomy. He had such a good opportunity today, but he failed to avenge his son's death. He had a feeling that it would be even more difficult for him to take revenge in the future. He had never expected that Jinyangzi would die. That Lin Yi had actually killed Jinyangzi. Regardless of whether Li Feilian had interfered or not, and regardless of the situation at the time, anyone who could kill a martial Dao master at the unity of heaven and man realm was not simple. Moreover, Lin Yi was an outstanding figure cultivated by the Yinma clan, so he would definitely be protected by the Yinma clan to a certain extent, just like now. Once Lin Yi stepped into the martial Dao master realm, even Xiahozhen was not confident that he could defeat him. Xiahozhen looked at Mr. Lu coldly and snorted, then turned around and left. Another troublesome figure had appeared in the Phaseless Demon sect. Previously, this Mr. Lu was not eye-catching in the Phaseless Demon sect, but now that he had stepped into the martial Dao master realm, the power he displayed was shocking. He was actually able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Xiahozhen, who had stepped into the martial Dao master realm for more than 10 years. There were many crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the demonic path, and it was definitely not as simple as it seemed to the outside world. After Xiahozhen left, Mr. Lu sneered in disdain. He also entered the blissful Devil Palace's palaces and began to search for some treasures. Mr. Lu was actually very low-key before, but after stepping into the martial Dao master realm, he wanted to find someone to test his strength on. Previously, when Chu Xiu was being hunted, he wanted to rescue Chu Xiu and fight Nie Renlong at the same time. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would come back himself? In a dense forest over 10 miles east of the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not go far. Instead, he left a unique mark of the Yinma clan outside, and temporarily recovered his strength. After half a day, Mr. Lu appeared here. What was even more strange was that Li Feilian was following behind him. Mr. Lu said to Li Feilian, "This is the most outstanding young talent of the Yinma clan, Lin Yi. You guys were fighting side by side just now, so you should be very familiar with each other." Li Feilian cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said simply, "Brother Chu." Li Feilian didn't seem to be good with words. He spoke very little, to the point where he treated his words like gold. Chu Xiu also cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said, "Brother Li's flying dagger is very strong. In fact, it's the strongest flying dagger I've ever seen. If there's a chance in the future, I hope to exchange pointers with Brother Li." Li Feilian nodded and said, "You flatter me." Seeing Li Feilian's appearance, Chu Xiu knew that it would be very difficult to chat with him. Chu Xiu turned to Mr. Lu and asked, "Brother Li, are you also a member of the Yinma clan?" Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Friend Li has nothing to do with my Yinma clan. He only has some relationship with my Phaseless Demon sect." Friend Li's lineage had a great background. Although it was only a single lineage, no one dared to look down on them. However, when it came to Friend Li's father's generation, there were some problems that caused his father to die early. That's why he entrusted our Phaseless Demon sect to help take care of Friend Li. Our Phaseless Demon sect's sect leader had received Friend Li's father's kindness in the past. In other words, if Friend Li's father was still alive, he should be one of the experts who stood at the peak of the Jianghu. Not to mention that Friend Li killed a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. Even if he killed the son of the Chunyang Dao sect's sect leader, his father would still be able to take it. At that time, our Phaseless Demon sect was hiding in the dark, so it wasn't convenient for us to fight against the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, we could only use some methods to help Friend Li conceal his identity and temporarily lay low. Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Chu Xiu finally understood what was going on back then. No wonder Chunyang Dao sect couldn't find Li Feilian even after searching 3 feet deep. It turned out that he had actually been hidden by the Phaseless Demon sect. Putting aside their strength, the Phaseless Demon sect's concealment skills were definitely top-notch. Li Feilian cupped his hands towards Mr. Lu and said, "I've already killed him. I've avenged half of the past. Mr. Lu, farewell for now." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Danger lurks everywhere in Xiaofan world. Be careful." Li Feilian nodded and turned to leave directly. Looking at Li Feilian's back, Chu Xiu said to Mr. Lu, "Coincidentally, Li Feilian's father died early in an accident. Didn't the Yinma lineage think of taking Li Feilian into the Yinma lineage?" Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Our Phaseless Demon sect really thought about this, but Li Feilian didn't agree. His lineage was neither righteous nor demonic, and basically did whatever he wanted. His father was an outstanding person of his generation. He had friends in all three lineages and was very popular. It was a pity that he died early. Otherwise, he would also be a distinguished figure of his generation. Li Feilian's father was kind to the sect master. Since Li Feilian wasn't willing, the sect master naturally wouldn't force him. Speaking of which, Li Feilian was also a pitiful person. His lineage was not ordinary people, and Li Feilian's father was even more so. He could be said to be handsome and elegant. He was very similar to that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. However, he was rather dissolute and left behind many dissolute debts in the Jianghu. Compared to Li Feilian's father, his mother was extremely ordinary. She wasn't even someone from the Jianghu. She was just an extremely ordinary-looking peasant girl. In the end, it was this peasant girl who made Li Feilian's father stop being dissolute. She even gave birth to Li Feilian. This made many people's jaws drop at that time. Li Feilian's appearance was also like his mother's. If he was like his father's, he probably wouldn't be much worse than that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. There were almost no ugly people in his lineage. All of them were handsome and elegant. Although Li Feilian wasn't ugly, he was too mediocre. He didn't look like his ancestor at all. Originally, with Li Feilian's background, his life should have been smooth sailing. However, when his father died, he wasn't even 10 years old. His mother even followed his father in committing suicide. Therefore, he had to rely on himself for the past 20 years. It wasn't until he couldn't hold on anymore that he turned to the phaseless demon sect for help. I still remember that Li Feilian's personality was very lively when he was young. He took after his father. However, as you can see now, he was silent and treasured his words like gold. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk, but he didn't know how to talk at all. Although his father passed the inheritance to him when he died, he was afraid that someone would covet his lineage's inheritance. Therefore, he went to the 100,000 mountains alone to cultivate in the ancestral land of his lineage. Although it was called the ancestral land, it was actually a graveyard protected by a formation. It was accompanied by the dead all day long. It wasn't until he reached the unity of heaven and man level in his 20s that he came out of seclusion. However, at that time, Li Feilian even forgot how to speak. Hearing this, Chu Xiu nodded. To be honest, he really didn't expect Li Feilian's life to be so rough. The world could only see how glorious the group of geniuses ranked on the Longhu roll were. But in fact, everyone's strength didn't come out of nowhere. Although the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen was born with the thunder mark on his palm, who knew that in order to cultivate the thunder art, he even risked serious injuries to cultivate in a rainstorm to comprehend the concept of heavenly thunder? Wisdom King Zhongshuan's physical body was invincible among those of the same rank, but who knew the inhuman pain of cultivating the Moonlight King's glazed golden body? It was the same for Chu Xiu. From a nobody to the top 5 of the Longhu roll. How many enemies had Chu Xiu killed? And how many times had he fallen into desperate situations? Even the most unreliable Feng Qishao, a talkative guy, had once sat alone in seclusion for 81 days in order to comprehend the sword art. He didn't eat, drink, sleep, or rest. When he came out of seclusion, he was already haggard. The saying that one can only become a superior person after suffering the most hardships wasn't 100% reliable. However, those who obtained great power without any hardships were always in the minority. At this time, Mr. Lu suddenly looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "If the Yinma clan took Li Feilian in, do you think you can still receive such treatment? Aren't you afraid that the Yinma clan will cultivate Li Feilian with all their strength?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Those who can't bear to see others do well and rely on others to become kings are destined to be unsuccessful. Take Sword King City's Lin Kaiyun for example. Even without Feng Qishao, he wouldn't have become the strongest among the Sword King City's younger generation. I don't need to fear anyone. As long as I'm stronger than any of my competitors, that's enough." Mr. Lu nodded inwardly. Everyone could talk big, but he could hear from Chu Xiu's tone that Chu Xiu wasn't talking big. He was confident, extremely confident. Moreover, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he had the right to be confident. "By the way, Mr. Lu, how's the competition in the blissful demon palace? Who got the most?" Mr. Lu's face darkened. "With the power of my sky demon formless art, it's most suitable to win in the chaos. I should have gotten the most. However, those guys from the righteous path like to outnumber me. When they saw that they couldn't stop me, the three of them joined hands, causing me to get a lot less. Even so, I still got about 20% of the treasures in the blissful demon palace. By the way, your friends Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng aren't weak. Not only did they seize the initiative, they also took advantage of the chaos to snatch a lot of things when I was fighting those three guys. They're second only to us four martial Dao grandmasters. Chu Xiu nodded. It was fine as long as he didn't suffer any losses. Chu Xiu didn't ask Mr. Lu what he got. Although he had a good relationship with Mr. Lu, friendship was friendship, and rules were rules. Just like how Mr. Lu didn't ask Chu Xiu about the usage and origin of the 7-demon saber. Some things could be said by oneself, but it was taboo for others to ask. Although Mr. Lu was a martial Dao grandmaster now, in his opinion, Chu Xiu's potential and current combat strength had far surpassed most martial Dao grandmasters. Naturally, Mr. Lu wouldn't become enemies with Chu Xiu just for a few treasures. It wasn't worth it. It was no different from throwing away a watermelon to pick up a sesame seed. Chapter 572. After Chu Xiu recovered his strength, he was ready to act with Mr. Lu. Before the final battle, Chu Xiu did not intend to reveal his true identity. Although the identity of the Devil Path could not be used to its peak in a chaotic battle, it was actually much more useful than his public identity. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He asked Mr. Lu, "Mr. Lu, have you ever heard of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths?" Mr. Lu frowned and said, "You mean the lunatic from ancient times? How do you know him?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I got the hungry ghost incarnation of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths." Chu Xiu had already used the hungry ghost incarnation before, so he did not need to hide it from Mr. Lu this time. Moreover, Chu Xiu was going to ask Mr. Lu for help to solve the problem of the hungry ghost incarnation. Mr. Lu was shocked when he heard this. "You are not going to practice this evil method, are you? I advise you to stop thinking about it. The Devil Venerable of 6 Paths is simply a lunatic. The cultivation method he passed down can only be practiced by lunatics. Now our Inma clan is not the same as the Kunlun devil cult in the past. If you dare to practice the evil method of the hungry ghost incarnation, our Inma clan can't protect you." Mr. Lu was a standard member of the Devil Path. Over the years, he had led the phaseless demon sect to do things in the dark and killed countless people. Therefore, what Mr. Lu cared about was not that the hungry ghost incarnation was against heaven and earth. If the Kunlun devil cult was still there, Chu Xiu could practice as he wanted. What he cared about was the consequences of practicing this evil method. After all, the righteous Wulin was now powerful. Once they found out, Chu Xiu would cause great trouble. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course I'm not going to practice it. In fact, I don't have the method to practice it." As he spoke, Chu Xiu briefly told Mr. Lu about Yuxian and the incarnation of the hungry ghost realm. Mr. Lu stroked his chin and said, "So, you're the only one in this world who has an incarnation of the hungry ghost realm? This is also your good fortune, but it is also a problem." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It is indeed troublesome. That is why I wanted to ask Mr. Lu if you have any way to minimize the impact of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation. After all, the phaseless demon sect has done a lot of research in this area." The phaseless demon sect's techniques were all-inclusive, and the Sky Demon Phaseless Mystic technique was only one of them. There were also disguises, aura concealment, and even arrays, goo techniques and other messy things. Perhaps the Phaseless Demon Sect had a way to deal with the side effects of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation, so that it wouldn't get excited and swallow him. Mr. Lu pondered for a while and said, "I told you that the demonic venerable of 6 Paths was a madman. Only a madman could cultivate something that was created by a madman. Right now, that hungry ghost realm incarnation is just a spirit. It only has instincts and no intelligence. So when it attacks, you naturally can't control it. That thing will only act according to its instincts. If this hungry ghost realm incarnation is refined, it will be equivalent to a clone of the demonic venerable of 6 Paths. That guy has 6 extra personalities, and rumor has it that he has even researched the soul-splitting technique. When the time comes, he can cut off a personality and integrate it into one. Then he can control it like a puppet. Naturally, he won't have to worry about the backlash. You don't have a split personality, so of course there will be problems if you use that madman's technique. It should be said that that guy's technique can only be cultivated by himself. Anyone else who cultivates it will have problems. With that said, Mr. Liu suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Puppet? I think of a person, and I'll take you to meet him. I believe he should have a solution." Who? Mr. Liu led Chu Xiu to the east and said, "The rogue cultivator of the Yinma clan, demon puppeteer Gong Shu Yuan, a guy with a strange temper. If he has a way to solve your problem, you have to give him something that can satisfy him first. Otherwise, that guy won't give face to anyone." Along the way, Mr. Liu also told Chu Xiu about the demon puppeteer Gong Shu Yuan. This person was also considered to be different in the diabolism. Gong Shu Yuan used to have an extraordinary background. He was a direct disciple of the Black Tortoise School, one of the four spirits, and even one of the successors of the Black Tortoise School. Among the four spirits, the Black Tortoise School was the most low-key, because most of the disciples of the Black Tortoise School were not good at fighting. They were good at making all kinds of mechanical tools, puppet traps, and the like. In fact, the Tang family fort in Sichuan was also good at making all kinds of mechanical hidden weapons. However, the Tang family fort was good at making some exquisite and powerful hidden weapons, most of which were dipped in poison. The ones made by the Black Tortoise School were not actually hidden weapons. They were just mechanical tools, large-scale war machines. For example, the Black Tortoise School once made 100 god-destroying crossbows for the Northern Yen. Each crossbow bolt was 10 feet long, and the body of the crossbow was engraved with formation patterns. Each bolt was individually made. It was said that one bolt could destroy a city, and even a martial Dao grandmaster would be pierced. Of course, this was only in theory. Big cities were protected by formations, and a crossbow bolt could not penetrate them. And small cities that could be penetrated by one bolt could be easily conquered by sending troops. Why would such a precious thing be needed? Moreover, using this thing to deal with martial Dao grandmasters was the same. Martial Dao grandmasters were not targets, so of course they would dodge. For example, if Chu Xiu stepped into the martial Dao grandmaster realm, these crossbow bolts would not even be able to touch him when he used the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. He could even use a straw boat to borrow the bolts. Therefore, this thing was of little value. Most importantly, the Northern Yen had been cheated once. The god-destroying crossbow that the Black Tortoise School gave to the Northern Yen only had one bolt, and they had to buy more after they ran out. In the end, the price of the bolt was the same as the body of the crossbow. It was simply a scam. Because of this, the old emperor of the Northern Yen, Xiang Long, almost beheaded the official who had bought these things. Of course, this was only an immature product of the Black Tortoise School. What the Black Tortoise School was really good at were puppets. They were mechanical puppets that looked like real people, and some of them were even comparable to martial Dao grandmasters. Refining a puppet was very complicated. One needed to be proficient in refining, formations, and martial arts at the same time. At the same time, the parts on each puppet were more than the bones in a human body. Some key parts also needed to be engraved with formation patterns. Therefore, the Black Tortoise School took years to refine a puppet. As the most outstanding disciple of the Black Tortoise School in the past, Gong Shu Yuan had once refined a qualified puppet when he was only at the Three-Flower realm. Although it was a little crude, its strength was better than most martial artists at the Five Qis origin realm. If he had developed normally, it would not have been a problem for Gong Shu Yuan to become the next leader of the Black Tortoise School. However, his mistake was that he was a little crazy when it came to refining puppets. He was not satisfied with using inanimate objects to refine puppets, so he secretly used human corpses to refine puppets. In the end, he even used living people to refine puppets. This was a big taboo in the Black Tortoise School. However, Gong Shu Yuan still did not think that he was wrong. In his opinion, puppets were originally avatars of martial artists. They pursued extreme lethality. What was the difference in materials used to refine them? In the end, Gong Shu Yuan was imprisoned by the angry leader of the Black Tortoise School. He wanted to hold a meeting to deal with him, But who would have thought that the puppet that Gong Shuyuan had refined would be disguised as a disciple? He was released and thrown into the demonic path. Using people to refine puppets was evil everywhere. It was only in the demonic path that this kind of thing was not new. It was actually very normal. Mr. Lu led Chu Xiu for dozens of miles and arrived at a hidden valley. As they walked, Mr. Lu complained, "That guy Gong Shuyuan is simply sick. Xiaofan Tian only opens once every 30 years. Everyone else comes here to find opportunities, but he comes here to find materials." After finding them, he actually started to refine puppets in the valley. He even said that this place is rich in spirit qi and is more suitable for carving formation patterns. It is a waste to give him the opportunity to open Xiaofan Tian. When Mr. Lu stepped into the valley, a dense golden formation pattern suddenly appeared in front of him. The golden formation pattern was like a blade that could tear through earth qi and flesh-treasured weapons. Every puppet master from the Divine Force School was also a formation master. Mr. Lu said unhappily, "It's me. Put away the formation." After a while, the formation disappeared. Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu stepped into the valley and saw a small old man squatting in a pile of messy parts. The small old man's hair was messy, and he was slovenly. He wore a dirty black robe. It was hard to imagine that he was a martial arts master. According to Mr. Lu, Gong Shuyuan was an outstanding disciple of the Black Force School when he was young. He was also an outstanding figure in Jianghu. Now that he had become like this, only God knew what Gong Shuyuan had experienced. Looking at Mr. Lu, Gong Shuyuan said unhappily, "Lu Jin, I told you not to disturb me. What are you doing here?" Mr. Lu snorted and said, "Of course I have something to talk to you about. This is a young talent of my Yinma branch, Lin Yi. You should have heard of his name. He needs your help with something." As he spoke, Mr. Lu told Gong Shuyuan about the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. After listening, Gong Shuyuan had a strange expression, but he was not as impatient as before. TSK, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path of the Six Paths Demon Lord? Interesting. Show me that thing first. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "It's here." Gong Shuyuan said unhappily, "Of course it's here. If you don't look, how will I know how to solve it? There are two martial arts masters here. Are you afraid that you can't control the situation?" Hearing Gong Shuyuan say this, Chu Xiu immediately mobilized his spiritual force and released the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. In an instant, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path was released. The evil aura that could devour and assimilate everything instantly erupted. Even the surrounding qi of heaven and earth was completely devoured. Okay, take it back." Gong Shuyuan waved his hand. Only then did Chu Xiu take back the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. However, in just a few seconds, his face was already a little pale. Mr. Lu asked, "Is there a way?" Gong Shuyuan narrowed his eyes and said, "There is a way, and there is more than one. However, it is very difficult to bring out the greatest power of the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. Lu Jin, you should know about puppets. What do you think of this thing?" Chapter 573. Hearing Gong Shuyuan say the words human puppet, Lu Jin frowned and said, "You want to make those disgusting things again?" Gong Shuyuan coldly snorted and said, "What do you mean disgusting? My human puppet is the masterpiece of puppet techniques developed to the peak, okay? Don't forget that you were surrounded by those bald donkeys from the Great Light Temple. If it wasn't for my human puppet coming to save you, I'm afraid you would have been killed by those bald donkeys." Lu Jin's face darkened and he quickly said, "Let's talk business. What are you planning to do?" At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly interrupted. "Let me interrupt. May I ask what this human puppet is?" Gong Shuyuan proudly said, "Human puppets are the strongest puppet techniques in the world. They can be called a perfect masterpiece. In this world, only I know how to make them." Saying this, Gong Shuyuan's eyes were filled with fanaticism. He wasn't being arrogant, but he truly believed it. In the Black Tortoise sect, the puppet technique is a kind of war mechanism. It's no different from those crossbow traps and the like. It's just that it's more flexible. But in my opinion, puppets are different from those things because puppets are mainly humanoid and imitate humans. They can even use martial techniques. Humans are the spirit of all living things, the strongest existence in the world. A newborn baby is not as good as a beast cub, and an adult human is not as good as a beast with sharp teeth. But the potential of humans is limitless. Martial experts can even tear dragons apart with their bare hands. Therefore, as a puppet that imitated a human form, its strength was the strongest. It was 10,000 times stronger than those ferocious tiger puppets or dragon-shaped puppets. But in the past, those fellows only used all kinds of materials to make puppets. Inanimate objects can't compare to humans, so I chose to use humans as materials to make human puppets. I engraved formation patterns on the human body and embedded them into mechanisms. Finally, it will become the strongest human puppet. Mr. Liu lightly said. So this is why you cut people into 8 pieces and cut them into tens of thousands of pieces. Even more ruthless than death by 1,000 cuts? What do you know? With that, Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand, and a swordsman shrouded in a black robe and wearing a bamboo hat appeared in front of Gong Shu Yuan with a long sword in his hand. The swordsman didn't have any vitality. It wasn't a living person, and living people couldn't be stored in space boxes. Following Gong Shu Yuan's action, the swordsman took off his bamboo hat, revealing an extremely terrifying face. His face was densely covered with knife scars, but they were sewn together by golden threads. Moreover, there were also densely packed runes engraved on the knife scars. They were very small and looked like tadpole characters. The swordsman's eyes were replaced with a pair of black crystals, and the runes were also constantly flashing. Under Gong Shu Yuan's control, the swordsman slashed at the valley. Sword energy soared to the heavens, and one slash actually cut off a cliff. This swordsman had the strength of a martial Dao grandmaster. Gong Shu Yuan smiled proudly and said, "This is the first grandmaster-level human puppet I've successfully made. It used to be a grandmaster-level expert of the sword hut. Through Heaven Sword Hua Bufeng. He wanted to kill me, but I killed him instead. In the end, I refined him into a puppet. This is the first time I used a grandmaster-level material to make a puppet, so I'm a bit rusty. Even though I added a lot of things later on, this puppet can only display less than 50% of its original strength. If I were to do it now, I could at least display 80%. Gong Shu Yuan turned his gaze to Chu Xiu and said, "The Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation originally had a body, a soul, a body, and a part of the 6 Paths Demon Venerable's intelligence. This is the complete Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation. Right now you only have a soul, so I refined a human puppet for you. It can be used as a container to store the soul. When it attacks, it can swallow everything, but you don't have to worry about it swallowing you as well. However, you are not a lunatic, so you can't merge a bit of intelligence into the puppet. However, this is not a problem. I will teach you how to control the puppet. You don't have to worry about the soul. You can directly control the puppet. Of course, this way. Its power cannot compare to the original Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation. According to my estimates, 50% to 60% of its power is the limit. Moreover, the soul of the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation can grow by swallowing, but a puppet is a dead object and cannot grow. So in theory, if your Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation swallows too many things, and its strength grows beyond the puppet's limit, you will have to change the puppet's container. Of course, the prerequisite is that I am still alive at that time." Gong Shu Yuan's last sentence was said very indifferently. With his identity, he also liked to look for all kinds of materials to refine all kinds of strange things. He might offend someone. Even he himself couldn't guarantee how long he could live. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Since Senior Gong Shu is confident, then we will do as Senior Gong Shu says." Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand and said, "Wait, there is something that hasn't been made clear yet. If you want me to refine a human puppet for you, you need to pay. Even if you are an outstanding talent cultivated by the Hidden Devil faction, you are not my disciple. In the future, you can't take care of me when I die. Why should I waste energy to refine a human puppet for you?" Gong Shu Yuan's words were very realistic, but Mr. Liu had already prepared Chu Xiu, so at this time, Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He only said lightly, "What does Senior Gong Shu need?" Gong Shuyuan sneered and said, "That depends on what you have first. I don't like ordinary things." In Gong Shuyuan's view, no matter how strong Lin Yi was, he was only a junior martial artist. What good things could he have? He was afraid that he would need the hidden devil faction to help him. Mr. Lu said, "Gong Shuyuan, don't you need a tantric cultivation method to use as a reference for the puppet's ability? Is an orthodox tantric incantation of the sixth revolution and above enough?" Gong Shuyuan's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Oh, you actually have such a thing?" Refining a human puppet was very complicated. Although Gong Shuyuan did not care about his appearance, he could be said to be very knowledgeable. From mechanisms to formations to martial Tao mysteries, there was almost nothing he didn't know. Moreover, the puppet's ability was different. This meant that Gong Shuyuan needed to understand a lot of martial Tao. There was no need to talk about the three factions of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic. He even needed to understand the saber path and the sword path. Of these, he could easily handle the cultivation methods of Taoism and demonic. There was no need to talk about the demonic path. There were 3,000 Taoist sects in ancient times. Actually, most of the cultivation methods now had some traces of Taoist cultivation methods. With Gong Shuyuan's ability and status, it was not a problem for him to obtain Taoist cultivation methods. The only thing that was more difficult was the Buddhist cultivation methods. Currently, the Great Light Temple and Subodhi Monastery were the two dominant sections. 90% of the Buddhist heritage was in these two sections. Furthermore, as a mainstream branch of the Buddhist sect, the Tantric sect was very small. Although Gong Shuyuan had a few Tantric cultivation methods, they were not considered strong. Lu Jin said to Chu Xiu, "Your fast and slow 9 words formula is an orthodox Tantric seal technique. Just pick one and give it to this old guy." As he said this, Lu Jin gave Chu Xiu a look, indicating that Gong Shuyuan could be trusted. After all, the fast and slow 9 words formula was actually one of Chu Xiu's signature cultivation methods. If he took out the fast and slow 9 words formula in front of Gong Shuyuan, it was basically equivalent to admitting his identity. Chu Xiu nodded. He would not randomly throw a seal technique to Gong Shuyuan, so he directly asked, "What kind of seal technique does Senior Gong Shu need?" "The seal technique in my hand is a cultivation method that combines the essence of tantric martial arts. It combines offensive and defensive techniques, and even speed and healing techniques. Every seal technique has a different effect." Gong Shuyuan said, "Of course, I want an offensive seal technique. Tantric seal techniques are big and fierce. Only offensive seal techniques are representative of tantric seal techniques." As he said this, Gong Shuyuan directly threw a jade slip to Chu Xiu and said, "Just use your mind power to imprint the cultivation method here." Gong Shuyuan was actually considered an array Dao Grand Master, so the technique transmission jade slip was nothing to him. After Chu Xiu imbued the Great Vajra Wheel seal into the seal technique, Gong Shuyuan took a look and immediately praised, "It is indeed the orthodox Vajra seal of Tantric. The Great Tao is the simplest. The power of Vajra slays evil and vanquishes demons. There is no need for so many transformations. Only power is the ultimate." Mr. Lu snorted and said, "You are a demon now. Are you going to surrender yourself? I've given it to you. Quickly think of how to refine a human puppet." Gong Shuyuan spread his hands and said, "How can I refine it without materials? Ordinary unity of heaven and man realm martial artists cannot fuse with the hungry ghost Tao incarnation, unless it is someone like Wisdom King Zongxian from the Great Light Temple. However, killing Zongxian is 100 times more difficult than killing a martial arts grandmaster. So, you should kill a martial arts grandmaster first. Remember, it needs to be fresh. Otherwise, when the blood and qi are drained, the strength of the puppet will decrease." Mr. Lu frowned and said, "Kill a martial arts grandmaster? That's easy for you to say. Martial arts grandmasters are not cats or dogs who will stand there and let you kill them. TSK, if I had known, we would have taken Zhen Yangzi's corpse away." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "We can't take it away. Daoist Guangning and Zhen Yangzi are both from the 3 main Daoist sections. It's fine that he couldn't stop me from killing Zhen Yangzi, but how could he let me snatch Zhen Yangzi's corpse? However, if we want the corpse, we might as well kill someone." The saintess has wanted that person dead for a long time. This is a good opportunity to kill him openly. Mr. Lu asked, "Who are you talking about?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Guanzhong torture room, the head of the arrest department, 5 technique sword and Liunian. Once this person is dead, the saintess and I will work together, and the Guanzhong torture room will be easily obtained. We can totally turn the entire Guanzhong torture room into our hidden devil lineage's secret ground." Chapter 574. Mr. Lu knew that Mei Qinglian had designs on the Guanzhong torture room. Otherwise, as the dignified holy maiden of the Yin demon sect and a martial arts grandmaster, Mei Qinglian would be able to do well with her strength and connections in the hidden devil sect. Even if the Yin demon sect only existed in name, why would she bother to become Guan Xiyu's wife? In any case, in Mr. Lu's opinion, although Guan Xiyu was also a figure in the pugilistic world, he was not worthy of Mei Qinglian. However, Mr. Lu didn't expect that Chu Xiu, who had only joined the Guanzhong torture room for a few years, would actually have designs on the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, even Chu Xiu himself did not know when he had come up with this idea. Perhaps it was because he was getting stronger and stronger, or perhaps it was because he had more and more subordinates. But he needed a place where he could truly settle down. The Guanzhong torture room had his foundation, and it was neither righteous nor demonic, so it was just right. Most importantly, Chu Xiu actually felt that Mei Qinglian was a little too hesitant in taking action. It had been so many years, but she still hadn't taken down the Guanzhong torture room. Perhaps this was the difference between women and men. Women always considered a lot of things, but if it was Chu Xiu, his choice would be very rough. Mr. Lu rubbed his chin and said, "If An Liunian wasn't with Guan Xiyu, I could consider taking action. However, killing An Liunian is easy. If you want to control the Guanzhong torture room, you first have to get rid of Guan Xiyu. Although I feel that Guan Xiyu is not worthy of the Holy Maiden, I have to admit that Guan Xiyu is indeed a top-notch figure. He might not be so easily bewitched by the Holy Maiden. Although the Yin demon sect's beauty technique is magical, I keep feeling that something is wrong." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I also asked the saintess about this matter, but she said that everything was under her control. In fact, it was the saintess who suggested Guan Xiyu to do so that I could enter Xiaofan heaven this time. Otherwise, the 3 keys to the Guanzhong punishment hall would have fallen into the hands of the 3 martial Dao masters." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "This is also what I'm puzzled about. The Holy Maiden also said that Guan Xiyu trusts and relies on her enough. The enchanted maiden art is very sensitive to this kind of subtle spiritual fluctuation. If something is wrong with Guan Xiyu, the saintess should be able to sense it." After saying that, Mr. Lu laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "Forget it, let's not think about this for now. How are you going to deal with An Liunian? I don't know much about this person's strength." Mei Qinglian's real age was actually about the same as Mr. Lu's. It was just that she was very young when she stepped into the 3-flower realm, and the martial Dao master realm, which had a very important impact on one's appearance. That was why she was able to maintain her current beautiful appearance, without looking old at all. Generally, when a martial artist stepped into the 3-flower realm very early, their appearance would stay in this realm for a long time. If you step into the martial Dao Grand Master realm again, before your appearance deteriorates during this period of time, your youthful appearance can still be preserved. Therefore, it was not strange at all for some of the martial Dao masters in their prime to look middle-aged while some looked young. It could only prove that they were stronger than you when they were young. It was the same for Mei Qinglian. No matter when, her strength was always above Mr. Lu. Therefore, it was not Mr. Lu's place to remind Mei Qinglian about this kind of thing. It was fine as long as she knew what she was doing. Chu Xiu did not dwell too much on this issue. He narrowed his eyes and said, "It's simple. I need the 2 of you to put on a show with me." Gong Shu Yuan said from the side, "Acting isn't a problem, but you have to be careful. When you kill them, you have to be careful. Don't damage their bodies. Otherwise, a broken body can't be refined into a puppet. Of course, it would be even better if you can capture him alive. Refining a human puppet with a living person would at least have 70% of his strength." Mr. Lu and Chu Xiu looked at each other. They were confident in killing a martial Dao master, but capturing a martial Dao master alive was a bit of a fantasy. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone a martial Dao master realm powerhouse. Most people would have the guts to fight with their lives at a critical moment. If Chu Xiu wanted to kill An Liuanian, he would first have to find him. Although Xiaofan Heaven was large, the probability of encountering other martial artists was not low. If they could communicate with each other, it would be easy to locate An Liuanian. However, things like voice transmission jade slips could not be used in Xiaofan Heaven. Therefore, Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu could only use the simplest method, which was to ask the Hidden Devil Clan martial artists who had entered. Therefore, their speed was a little slow, and they did not dare to go too fast. Anyway, there were opportunities and secret treasures everywhere in Xiaofan Heaven. It was not a big deal if they could not find An Liuanian. They would eventually have a chance to meet him. Fortunately, Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu did not have to wait until the end. 2 days later, a disciple of the Hidden Devil Clan met An Liuanian and gave Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu a rough location. If An Liuanian was not in a hurry, he should not have been able to escape this area. At this moment, An Liuanian wasn't in a rush to travel, but his face was a little dark. That's because he had experienced the baptism of spiritual energy in the past few days in the minor mortal sky, increasing his foundation a little, but he hadn't accomplished a single thing that he wanted to do. It was not that An Liuanian was too incompetent, but he did not know if there was some kind of pattern to the rules in Xiaofan Heaven. It was clearly a random teleportation, but An Liuanian ended up being teleported together with several other martial Dao masters. Although An Liuanian was not arrogant about his strength, he was very confident. He dared to fight 1 or 2 people, but there were several of them. Of course, An Liuanian could not compete with them, so he left after obtaining a few items. In the end, An Liuanian was unlucky to discover that he did not seem to have obtained anything useful, but even some of the younger martial artists had obtained more than him. As for An Liuanian, he could not bring himself to rob these younger generation cultivators. This was not because An Liuanian was kind or anything, but because he could not afford to lose face. It was that simple. Just as An Liuanian was letting his imagination run wild, 2 figures sped over from afar. When they saw An Liuanian, one of them hurriedly shouted, "Great leader! Help!" An Liuanian frowned even harder when he saw this person, as he hated Chu Xiu very much. Chu Xiu had already changed back to his previous attire. Behind him was a human puppet dressed in black and holding a long sword. However, the human puppet was currently surrounded by demonic flames, concealing the deathly aura on its body. In fact, An Liuanian did not have any feelings for Chu Xiu previously, nor would he target him just because he was Guan Siyu's subordinate. Most of the people in the Guanzhong torture room were Guan Siyu's subordinates, so he could not possibly target all of them. An Liuanian hated Chu Xiu only because he was too close to that witch, Mei Qinglian. In the past, he had lost to Chu Kuanga for the position of Guanzhong torture room's hall master. Subsequently, he had also lost to Guan Siyu. However, Guan Siyu had done a better job in her position. Therefore, An Liuanian did not choose to cause trouble in secret. He only wanted to retain a portion of his authority. After all, internal strife would harm the Guanzhong torture room itself. As someone who had grown up in the Guanzhong torture room, An Liuanian sincerely hoped that the Guanzhong torture room would become stronger and more prosperous. Therefore, even though he had his own selfish motives, he would not harm the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. However, from An Liuanian's point of view, Guan Siyu had been bewitched by that demon woman to the point of losing his bearings. He had even listened to the demon woman's words to allow a junior like Chu Xiu to enter the minor Fan Tian. Chu Xiu and that witch were clearly birds of a feather. Therefore, An Liuanian had no intention of interfering when he saw Chu Xiu being chased. He sneered and said, "You want to enter the Xiaofan Heaven to fight with others when you are not strong enough? You are courting death. What were you thinking back then?" As Chu Xiu fled, he shouted, "Great leader, there is an ancient relic in front. There are only some juniors from the Devil Dao guarding it. You saved me, so I will bring you there. We will split the items inside 50-50. An Liuanian's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. However, he sneered and said, "You are being chased like a stray dog, yet you still dare to say that you will split it 50-50 with me? Everything inside is mine. Only the things that I don't fancy are yours. Chu Xiu gritted his teeth and put on a sullen expression. At that moment, the human puppet behind him slashed out with its sword. Torrential demonic chi swept over with immense might. The puppet used to be a grandmaster of the sword hut, so it was not weak in the first place. Although it had been refined into a puppet, and its attacks were extremely stiff, no one would be able to see through it unless it was someone familiar to the grandmaster when he was alive. Chu Xiu hurriedly dodged as he shouted, "We will do as you say, great leader." And Liuyan sneered. He raised his hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. The blade was extremely sharp, and the power of Eugene transformed into a boundless blade that sent the human puppet flying with a single slash. Chu Xiu's eyebrows twitched slightly. This was not an act of the human puppet, but in Liuyan's own strength. As expected of a senior martial artist who had the right to compete with Guan Siyu for the position of hall master in the Guanzhong torture room back then, his strength was indeed extraordinary. At that moment, the human puppet spoke in a hoarse voice that sounded like a machine grinding against itself. "How dare you snatch someone from my hidden devil lineage?" And Liuyan sneered and said, "You hidden devil lineage don't even dare to reveal your full strength. Who are you trying to scare now? Ridiculous." With that, and Liuyan drew the other sword on his back. In that instant, crimson sword chi erupted. Under the blazing sword intent, even the demonic chi around the human puppet was completely suppressed. Chapter 575. And Liuyan's 5 techniques sword had gathered the power of the 5 elements. Its might had even exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations. Human puppets were just puppets, after all. Gong Shuyuan had said that they could retain the strength they had when they were alive, but he had only been referring to their basic strength. However, a warrior's combat strength wasn't just related to strength. It also had to do with their willpower, combat experience, and other things that human puppets lacked. Therefore, in its battle within Liuyan, the human puppet had been suppressed in almost every aspect. In the end, it had retreated and shouted in a hoarse voice, "And Liuyan, how dare the Guanzhong torture room? I'll remember this. We'll settle this score in the future." After speaking, the human puppet turned and fled. Chu Xiu, who was behind it, cursed inwardly. Was Gong Shuyuan's head frozen from refining puppets? To think that he had made such a low-level mistake. The Guanzhong torture room kept a low profile in the pugilistic world, but in Liuyan was even more so. While most people knew that the Guanzhong torture room had a department called the Criminal Investigations Department, they didn't even know about Fang Sha and Si Ming, who were the most frequent visitors, let alone in Liuyan, who spent most of his time in seclusion. Therefore, there were many suspicious points in Gong Shuyuan's words through the human puppet. Fortunately, and Liuyan didn't sense anything amiss. Actually, when Guan Siyu had just inherited the position of hall master, and Liuyan had been rather famous in the pugilistic world. After all, most people had believed that An Liuyan would inherit the position of hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, and not Guan Siyu. Therefore, An Liuyan's reputation had actually been greater than Guan Siyu's. In addition, An Liuyan hadn't stepped into the pugilistic world for many years, so he had forgotten that people in the pugilistic world were very forgetful. Apart from some of the factions that had been close to the Guanzhong torture room in the past, most people had already forgotten about him. Looking at Chu Xiu, An Liuyan asked coldly, "Where is the relic?" Chu Xiu replied, "It's just up ahead. Great leader, please follow me." An Liuyan grunted coldly and said, "Don't even think about playing any tricks. Don't think that you're on equal footing with us just because you're Guan Siyu's trusted aide and defeated Fang Sha. In the past, when Chu Kuanga was the hall master, I led the punishment division to slaughter in the Jianghu. At that time, not to mention a junior like you, even Guan Siyu was still a lowly constable of the Jianghu in the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu lowered his head and nodded in acknowledgement. He acted as if he wanted to retort but was holding back for the time being. And Liuyan did not find anything wrong with this. It would be strange if Chu Xiu didn't react at all, and directly admitted defeat. However, it didn't matter. He didn't need Chu Xiu to be convinced. He just needed Chu Xiu to bring him to the ruins. There must be a lot of good stuff in the ruins for a martial Dao master of the hidden devil clan to come after him. Chu Xiu led in Liunian to a remote valley, which made him frown slightly. The spiritual qi in Xiaofan heaven was abundant, but there were strong and weak ones as well. Most of the ruins were in places with abundant spiritual qi. However, the spiritual qi in this valley was very thin. Someone had actually built a sect here? Chu Xiu led the way into the valley. And Liunian didn't think too much when he saw Chu Xiu enter first, and directly stepped in. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu shouted, "Oh no! Someone else got here first." And Liunian immediately walked over and asked, "What happened?" Chu Xiu pointed to the black corpses lying on the ground in a circle in front of the valley entrance and said, "These are the warriors from the hidden devil clan who were in charge of guarding the ruins. Now that they're all dead here, it's likely that someone beat me to it when I was being hunted down." And Liunian looked at Chu Xiu suspiciously. "Is there such a coincidence? Are you trying to trick me? There are no ruins here at all." Chu Xiu hurriedly said, "How would I dare lie to you, Chief? These corpses are still fresh, so they were obviously just killed." And Liunian was still a little doubtful when he heard that. Chu Xiu didn't have a good reputation in the Guanzhong torture room, so he had always suspected that there were ruins in another place. This place was a place that Chu Xiu had been to previously, but he had already ransacked it. He had also killed the people and lied to Liunian that someone had beaten him to it. And Liunian was indeed a warrior from the Guanzhong torture hall. Although he had long since ceased to be a constable of the Jianghu, his professionalism was still very strong. In a short moment, he had been able to deduce so many things in his mind. Therefore, with his suspicions, Liunian was prepared to personally check the corpses to see if they had really died at the hands of Chu Xiu. However, just as Liunian walked towards those corpses suddenly leapt to their feet. Threads were connected in their hands, and the light of the array formation flowed into them. It was like an inescapable net that enveloped Liunian. It was only then that Liunian noticed that these corpses weren't dead at all. They were repulsive puppets draped in human skin. Scram! Liunian unsheathed his golden sword and unleashed the sharpness of Yu Jin's aura to the extreme. Those puppets that were only at the unity of heaven and man realm were directly sent flying. However, the threads didn't move at all as they continued to attack Liunian. Gong Shuyuan leaped down from the valley and laughed loudly. "Don't waste your effort. It's useless. This is a god-binding net that I weaved using the silk of countless strange insects such as the snow domain ice silkworm, the North Sea water silkworm, and the southern border gold silkworm. Even divine weapons can't cut it." However, Liunian's attention wasn't on Gong Shuyuan. Instead, it was on something behind him. The instant Liunian had been ambushed, he had thought of something. Since this was a trap, what role did Chu Xiu, who had lured him here, play? Therefore, at this moment, Liunian immediately turned around. The four swords behind him were all unsheathed, and the power of the five elements erupted. Liunian stabbed out with his sword, and the five-colored sword aura drew in the power of the heavens and the earth. Although he was alone, he had set up an extremely powerful sword formation. Behind him, Chu Xiu didn't use trump cards like the Hungry Ghost Dao Incarnation or the 7 Demon Blades. These things consume too much energy. Furthermore, Gong Shuyuan had said that it was best to capture him alive. Therefore, Chu Xiu immediately formed hand seals. Buddhist light shone from his body as he executed the great sun shifting technique. Vairocana's illusory figure shrouded the sun and moon within the boundless Buddhist light. Sun shifting steals the heavens. The palm of Vairocana collided with the 5 elemental sword formation. An extremely powerful shockwave suddenly erupted, forcing Liunian to take a few steps back. A look of shock appeared in his eyes. He had miscalculated. This was Chu Xiu's true strength. Liunian had only seen Chu Xiu attack once, which was against Fang Sha. However, Fang Sha hadn't used his trump card, and Chu Xiu hadn't used his full strength either. The reason why Chu Xiu had been able to defeat Fang Sha so easily was because Fang Sha had underestimated him. Secondly, Chu Xiu's grasp of the battle rhythm was too outstanding. He wasn't inferior to martial Dao masters like them. Therefore, Liunian could only tell that Chu Xiu was pretty strong during that battle. However, he didn't think that Chu Xiu was strong enough to threaten him. Now that the great sun-changing technique had been unleashed, he could feel its power. Other things aside, Chu Xiu's explosive power alone was already comparable to his. If he had known how strong Chu Xiu was, he wouldn't have been fooled right from the beginning. Although the demonic grandmaster who was chasing after Chu Xiu had decent strength, he wasn't considered strong. With Chu Xiu's strength, let alone being chased by him, he could even kill him. However, it was too late now. All Lionian wanted to do was to escape the encirclement. At that moment, Gong Shuyuan yelled in distress, "Be careful when you attack. Don't damage my god-binding net." As soon as he said that, he saw Lionian performing a sword seal. In an instant, the other four swords followed closely behind the golden sword. As he slashed with his sword, a sharp golden sword gleam slashed out, tearing everything apart. The god-binding net was instantly slashed apart. The power of the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. After the other 4 swords reinforced and restrained each other, they transferred their power to the golden sword, allowing the sharpness of the net to be unleashed to the extreme. The god-binding net could only defend against divine weapons in theory. However, the might unleashed by a divine weapon coupled with a martialist's martial arts technique was not certain. When he saw this, Gong Shuyuan's heart ached so much that he trembled. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have helped. The golden sword was sharp, while the water sword was soft. A transparent ripple erupted from the water sword in Lionian's hand. As he slashed with his sword, the air before him fluctuated, and Lionian's figure also moved according to the rhythm of the ripple. He was like a swimming fish as he rapidly fled out of the valley. However, at this moment he was shocked to discover that even though he was only less than 300 meters away from the exit of the valley, and could escape in a few breaths' time, it was as if he was walking on the spot. The exit was still so far away. When he looked around, there was no longer any valley. It was pitch black all around him. The Yellow Springs River flowed on the ground, and countless evil spirits roared at him. In the sky, there was even a seductive demonic woman dancing around, stirring up his desire. Shatter! The 5 swords circled around in Lionian's body, eventually turning into a scorching red color. The 5 swords slashed out in unison, and the scorching sword intent burned away all the evil spirits and filth, revealing Mr. Lu's figure before him. Phaseless demon sect. And Lionian's eyes immediately widened. He didn't recognize Gong Shuyuan, but the phaseless demon sect's sky demon formless technique was still very famous. Turning his head towards Chu Xiu, and Lionian gritted his teeth and said, "Chu Xiu, so you're actually colluding with demons. Damn it, you really deserve to die." At this moment, what Lionian was thinking about was not his own safety, but the future of the Guanzhong torture room. A fellow who was colluding with demons had infiltrated the Guanzhong torture room, and even become one of the 4 torturers, Guan Siyu's trusted aide. With such a fellow with ill intentions around, and Lionian didn't dare to imagine what the future of the Guanzhong torture room would be like. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.